do you make of the way the BBC has handled this?
Well, I think first of all, the first thing to say is that I am concerned about the alleged victim of this situation. I am concerned that these allegations, having come to light almost 6 weeks ago, it would seem, and this has only sort of reached the public domain over the last sort of 48 hours. I'm pleased to see that a suspension has taken place and that the Culture Secretary has met with the Director General and that a suspension has now taken place. It's right that we now allow them to have that investigation take place, and if referral to external bodies such as the police is necessary, then that's what will have to happen.
Seema, would you agree with that? Do you think the BBC should be left to conduct this investigation, or would you like to see an outside body, indeed the police, brought in to look into this?
It is absolutely the case that the allegations are extremely serious, and it is right that the BBC has suspended the individual and is undertaking an investigation. I do think that this is where people will be very surprised that it's taken so long for the BBC to take action if they first heard about this in May. And there are questions then of making sure that the governance is fit for purpose. I think with the commentary that you've also heard, I'm sure that there will be questions that parliamentarians and I expect the select committee, cross-party select committee, will be asking, for example, how it has taken this long, and probably to understand this so that it doesn't happen again. There is a matter of trust in the BBC and wanting to make sure with crises the BBC has had recently that we see that those are all addressed. We don't know much more about the circumstances, and I think it's very important that we do allow the investigation to take place, and then with the proper accountability structures to look into what can be learnt about what's happened.
Amy Callaghan, the BBC's statement says that although it first became aware of a complaint in May, new allegations were put to us on Thursday of a different nature. And in addition to our own inquiries, we have been in touch with external authorities in line with our protocols. And of course, the person involved has been suspended. I mean, it is very difficult, this, isn't it? Allegations are made quite frequently against high-profile presenters. Do you think that the BBC's handling of this has been good?
What I would say initially is that these allegations are deeply concerning and deeply distressing, and as a public sector broadcaster, they do have a duty to act in the public interest, and thus far it appears they've been less than transparent. So I think we need to see more of that, and I think key answers must be provided to parliamentarians in the coming days on what the BBC knows, how they're going to investigate and how they'll act.
James, what do you make of what's going on here? The story was first reported by The Sun. Clearly, we know that a lot of other media organisations are very quick to jump on any kind of allegations that concern the BBC, but it is a very difficult and a very delicate situation. And we shouldn't forget that there is a young person at the heart of all of this.
Yes, completely. I'm very interested to know why The Sun didn't name the star in the front of their newspaper. And now you've got this kind of bizarre situation, a sort of reverse Spartacus, where people are coming out saying, it's not me. You know, you've mentioned some at the top of the hour, people like Ryland Clark, Jeremy Vine, having to now dissociate themselves from these allegations. So it's a very interesting one. And obviously you've now got the internet saying all sorts of things. This a few days after the poison pen letter had to be reported to the police about George Osborne. So I do think it does raise issues around not just the BBC, but also how we report these stories to do with privacy and media law as well. I think you're listening to all of the contributions from the MPs thus far. It's clearly a story of great concern to people in Parliament, and it comes at a very bad time for the BBC, because there's a story in today's papers about ministers potentially considering reforms to the licence fee so that the licence fee doesn't rise with inflation, which obviously at a time when you've got kind of 8-9% inflation would be a big hit to the corporation's finances. So I do think that the BBC has to keep in mind that they need public assent to paying the licence fee on this.
Yeah, and I'll come to to that point about the licence fee in a moment, but Seema Malhotra, there is a very difficult situation here, isn't there, when the presenter involved has not been identified. There is huge speculation swirling on social media and all sorts of allegations being made against a number of other different high-profile presenters, some of whom, as James has reflected, have already come out to say, look, this has nothing to do with me. And the way that these stories unfold across our social media does add a whole new dimension to it, doesn't it?
It does in a sense, because in the absence of confidence in the process that's been gone through, in the way the story has now come out, when it's been effectively 2 months that has passed since the BBC first knew about it, it almost becomes a free-for-all with people suddenly being able to speculate, and that isn't that isn't right or fair for those who are innocents caught up in this. These are still allegations, very serious, as yet still going through an investigation. There's a young person whose welfare should be of paramount concern to us all. And look, we've seen this happen in all sorts of ways, with all sorts of situations, not just scandals. And it's almost as if there's a sort of, you don't always know who's behind the posts as well, and that can be causing great hurt to the families involved also. This is why I think it is very important that the investigation proceeds with clarity about what the process is, with confidence that it's being taken seriously, and that there are lessons that are learned. And I think the quicker it happens, the quicker the speculation on social media will also come to an end, which is extremely important.
Amy, the danger here is that now you have had a presenter suspended. It is surely just a question of time before the individual concerned is identified.
Yeah, we can assume that that's going to be established fairly quickly. But I think, like James said, we're in a fairly outrageous situation just now where folk like Gary Lineker, like Rylan Clark, like Jeremy Vine are having to state on social media that it's not them. I think the BBC have a lot to answer for to their other presenters who are not part of this situation.
And Peter, do you accept that by not acting sooner, they have created the circumstances in which it's inevitable that you'll have this huge speculation across social media and the finger will be pointed at all sorts of people who are completely innocent?
I mean, it's not new that members of the public will speculate about news where an individual hasn't been named. That's not new. Those conversations would once upon a time have been happening around people's breakfast and dinner tables. But with the advent of social media, people are airing that speculation online. And so we're all able to see everyone's view about who they suspect that it is. And that's led to the increased frenzy. I think we need to make a distinction, don't we, between the allegations that were made in May that didn't lead to prompt action from the BBC and the allegations that were reported on Thursday of this week, which has prompted greater action. It's not sensible to speculate on what the BBC has done in terms of its internal investigations already. They've certainly acted fairly promptly as a result of what happened on Thursday. So I think it's not wise for us to speculate any further at this particular point in time in respect of that.
Peter, James Heal was talking there about the renewed talk of potentially looking again at the licence fee, or maybe ensuring that it doesn't rise in line with inflation. Some of the rhetoric on that seems to have cooled somewhat since Nadine Dorries was removed from her post as Culture Secretary, and with the change of government. Do you think there should be changes to the licence fee, or do you think it should at least be pegged at its current level at a time when people are struggling to make ends meet?
Well, I think there's a number of things to say. Certainly in my region, we've seen, or we are seeing, the proposed reduction in local political coverage, local news coverage, local funding for local radio programming, with shared programming across a much wider region, and that is deeply concerning. But then I think overall, those are the programmes that our constituents are probably the most deeply concerned about, because that provides them with that local connectivity. At a time of these cost of living challenges, I think it's right that we are mindful that we shouldn't let the licence fee run away with itself. The world has changed with streaming media, online sources of programming from a variety of different providers, and the way that people behave in terms of their viewing habits has changed beyond all recognition from when the licence fee. So I'm more than happy for us to have a discussion about that and a debate about what that looks like, because I want to see the BBC as a public service broadcaster giving good value for money and providing the content locally and providing that local accountability that my constituents certainly look forward to having on their local radio station.